Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
This is Capital Notes from Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Maayan Silver in conversation with J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com. Hi there, J.R. Welcome back to Capital Notes.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So there was a national Marquette poll released last week. The number of voters who strongly approve of Republican President Donald Trump dropped to 17%, and the number of voters who strongly disapprove of him rose to 48%. Can you put this in context and explain how it might impact the November midterms?
Well, it's pretty simple. The worse Donald Trump's numbers are, the better it is for Democrats. Now, we're still a long ways from November, don't forget that. But in talking to people on the Capitol, there's a sense that, one, the party in power in the White House is almost always a drag on its candidates in a midterm election. And two, if Donald Trump is in the 30s for his job approval rating and gas prices are $4 come mid-October, Republicans are in real trouble. Now, 2018 was a midterm election with Trump in the White House, and you go back and look at those numbers, a Marquette poll of Wisconsin voters, and Trump got back into I think it was low to mid-40s, the last poll before the election. It was still a good night for Democrats. It wasn't a huge wipeout. If, though, you're seeing Trump in the 30s and people are still feeling happy about cost, that's a real problem because the whole kind of crux of Trump's campaign or pitch for 2024 was, I can fix the affordability issue and I can fix immigration. You can argue about how immigration is going with terms of enforcement actions, if that's popular with people, but there's two ways about it. The war with Iran has driven up gas prices. People are not feeling relief at the grocery store or the pump, and so there's a real problem for Republicans on that affordability front.
And those top issues for voters in that poll were inflation and the cost of living, the U.S.-Israel war with Iran, and the economy. What are the key takeaways there?
It's been no mystery. People have been unhappy about how costs rising for several years now. Now, Democrats got a reprieve in 2022 from some of those issues because of the Dobbs decision, which is the one from the U.S. Supreme Court, from the right to an abortion. That really motivated female voters especially, who cared about abortion rights, and really changed the dynamic of that midterm election. If it hadn't been for Dobbs and some other things, Democrats would have had a very tough election cycle because of Joe Biden in the White House. Fast forward to now, what's the event that could happen between now and November that would be Dobbs-like for Republicans to shake off or to get through this malaise they're going through? Because it's not just Trump being underwater with voters. If you look at all these indicators from voter enthusiasm to satisfaction with your own personal situation, it's not looking good for Republicans. The best thing for them is time. It's still late April. There's still some time. But in my conversations with people, one thing that's come through is, at what point do people have to start feeling better to have it really break through in the polls? And I've had people tell me Memorial Day, July 4th, Labor Day, sometime, but it can't be mid-October before interest rates drop and inflation drops for it to be good for Republicans. It has to happen sometime soon, really sooner rather than later.
It's the end of April. We still have about 6 months left until the midterms. All 99 Wisconsin Assembly seats and half of the state Senate, so about 17 seats are up for grabs. And the maps are not as favorable to Republicans in the first place as in years past. Given this national climate and then what you're watching for in the state legislature, can you lay out the races to watch as Democrats try and flip the state Senate? Or, there's 4 of them, right?
Yep. In the Senate, there are 4 seats to really pay attention to. And all 4, Kamala Harris got more votes than Donald Trump in 2024. So that's not a great starting point for Republicans, especially because 24 was kind of a bad year for Democrats. So if you are now projecting a good year for Democrats, probably makes it a tougher climb. But you start in the Milwaukee suburbs. Brookfield, Rob Hutton, Republican, has retired, decided not to seek re-election. So we have a race there for his seat in the Milwaukee suburbs. Van Wangard, Republican from Racine, he's retiring, not seeking re-election. Race for his district that runs from kind of Racine on Lake Michigan, juts out in the county and goes north into Milwaukee County. Go west, we have Senator Howard Markline, Republican, co-chair of the Finance Committee. His southwestern Wisconsin seat is one that's really much in play. And then you go up to the Eau Claire area, and Jeff Smith, a Democrat from Brunswick, he's the one kind of true pickup opportunity for Republicans. So Republicans started the session with an 18-50 majority. They got to keep at least 2 of those seats to hold on. They had a good candidate against Jeff Smith and Senator Jesse James, who was drawn into a different district from the one he lived in for years on the new map. So he was elected the 22nd, was drawn into the 31st, the map, so he got a temporary residence in his district to keep representing it. He's going to run against Smith, but he dropped his bid last week. That makes it tougher. Republicans only have 1 incumbent in those 4 seats are trying to defend, or 4 seats are trying to contest. That's not great for them on this environment. In the assembly, there are, depending who you talk to, 10 dozen seats that are going to be competitive. Just depends, is there a wave? If there is, how high is it? But there really is a narrow path for Democrats in the assembly because they really did pick up a lot of seats in 2024. They're now down 54-45. They've got to flip seats like Dean Coffert Nina, a Republican who was in the legislature before, left when he became mayor of Nina, came back and ran above the top of the ticket. So we haven't heard from Dean yet if he's going to run, but that's one that Democrats would have to win to give a path majority. Jesse Rodriguez, Milwaukee suburbs, another one who ran above the top of the ticket. She would have, she doesn't know if she's going to run yet, but Democrats would have to win that seat to have a realistic path to majority. Todd Novak, Republican from Dodgeville, another one where does better than the top of the ticket. So there are opportunities there for Republicans to rise above what's going on nationally, but it's not easy. So you start with those 3, then you've got to go look at Ben Franklin up in Green Bay, Republican as a freshman. That was a narrow race from 2024. And for Democrats, you got to start thinking, okay, they've got to protect Ryan Spotty in Green Bay, who nearly won his race. Steve Doyle in Alaska, who won a seat that Donald Trump also took more votes than Kamala Harris. So again, there's a path there for Democrats in the assembly, but it's not very wide unless there's that big wave, right? The bigger the wave is, the better the chance for the Democrats to take control of the assembly.
This is Capital Notes. I'm Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross of WisPolitics.com. Okay, J.R., we were just talking about the legislature. Moving on to the race for governor in Wisconsin. Last week, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reported on some comments from Democratic candidate and current Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez. She was recorded saying at a Democratic event that if she was elected, she'd craft her first state budget, quote, behind a curtain. Can you remind people about how the budget process usually works and basically how what she's proposing is different? And do you think it was a political misstep?
Well, the reality is the budget is almost always crafted behind closed doors. I have been covering the Capitol for 26 years. I have yet to cover an honest-to-goodness negotiation in public. Now, there is a public process. Governors often have public hearings where they take input from people at around the state. There's a joint finance committee which does public hearings of the budget, then does public votes. But everything actually done in the budget is done in private. It's just the way it is. I've not seen any governor call the media in to watch him negotiate with a stakeholder or a lawmaker about what he or she wants to do with the budget. It doesn't exist. That said, this is not a great look for Rodriguez because part of a pattern emerging where she's kind of said some things that have raised eyebrows. And part of it is maybe being a little bit naive about the process. One, she was speaking in this case to some Democrats in Rock County. If you're a public official, you always assume you're being taped, that you're being watched, even in private. And 2, never trust that just because you're in front of people who are in your party that they're going to keep what you say secret, because there are people in that room who like your primary opponents. So things are going to get out. Let's go. A little bit of a misstep. It might raise some questions about her viability at some point. But the bigger thing for all these folks running for governor on the Democratic side is, where's the money going to come from? What outside group or groups is going to spend for you? We go through the list of everybody, and Mandela Barnes has the highest name ID. Okay, so how do you catch them? You catch them with money. And looking at the finance reports from January, nobody raised enough money for a sustained, significant media buy for months on end leading up to the primary in August. So where do you get help? Well, either you have to really up your fundraising, which I've heard from campaigns and others that it's a slog because it's such a wide open field, or 2, you've got some backers who go to an outside group and they do ads for you, and that can help immensely. Kelda Roy's got endorsed by WEAC, States Overseas Teachers Union. That should help her somewhat, but WEAC isn't a financial 800-pound gorilla like it used to be back 25 years ago. So what can WEAC do? Does Missy Hughes or Joel Brennan or Francesca Hong, do they have an outside group to help them? between now and the primary, because that's going to be required. And now the flip side is, even if you get help, what if Mandela Barnes gets more help? Again, remember, he starts with a name ID advantage. You can't just catch him. You have to overtake him. And if he has somebody spending for him, or he can spend enough on his own, it makes it hard to catch him, right? So that's what we're really watching. Yes, this is a gaffe by Rodriguez. It's not a great look. You never admit in public what, you do things in secret. But really, the thing people are watching for more than anything else is, where's the money going to come from? When's it going to start? Rodriguez has said she has like $4.5 million in backing, roughly. Now, the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association in the fall said to do $2 million in independent expenditures for her. She has said she has commitments from other donors to groups that do 2.5 in her behalf. Well, that's a lot of money, but when's it going to start? If there's that much really there, you would think mid-May, early June, we would see something. If we don't, you got to start wondering, like, where's that help coming from, and when's it going to start?
And you were talking about the headwinds for Republicans nationally and how that's affecting people locally. But in that race for governor, there's multiple candidates. There's going to be a fairly large Democratic primary in August. And yet the GOP has kind of coalesced around one candidate, Congressman Tom Tiffany. How is that going to factor into, Republicans and Democrats' chances in November?
Right. Tiffany has the opportunity to kind of get donors to rally around him. Now, there's this continuous scuttlebutt about Tommy Thompson and whether he's interested in running again, and it's kind of like this open thing running in Madison of like, will he or won't he? We've seen this dance with Tommy before where he has talked about wanting to run, but in the end decided not to. All that said, Tiffany has the opportunity to kind of get the GOP coalition behind him to focus on his general election message. He did an ad recently introducing himself to people as this like boat captain and girl dad who likes old fashions, trying to humanize him a little bit. So it's a great opportunity for him to focus on that. Or Democrats, they don't know who their nominee is going to be. They don't know if that nominee is going to be bruised and battered after the primary. Is it going to get ugly? How much money that nominee have? So even though there are advantages for Democrats nationally with the environment, if a candidate emerges from that primary who has got electability problems, that helps Tiffany. If that candidate emerges has financial problems, it helps Tiffany. So there are avenues there, but you can also bet that national Democrats are preparing for that scenario where whoever wins the nomination is broke on August 12th, the day after the primary, and will come with an infusion of cash up on the air to help that person to make sure that there isn't a window where Republicans beat up the Democratic nominee unanswered heading into the general election.
Finally, I wanted to ask you about something very specific to last week. The Wisconsin Department of Justice announced that they're suing Polymarket and others. I think it's the first state to sue over alleged illegal sports betting. Attorney General Josh Kaul says that the companies are disguising the sports betting they facilitate on their online platform as event contracts, which pay out just like ordinary bets based on the odds of sports-related outcomes. What do we need to know here? Anything?
Well, it's be interesting how it plays out. And then, too, don't forget the backdrop of all this is we are on the edge of maybe having online gaming legalized in Wisconsin. The bill passed out of the legislature, signed by the governor, that would change the definition of a bet to allow an online wager to be placed. Now Evers has to negotiate compacts with the Native American tribes to allow that to operate. You have to have your servers on tribal lands, and tribes have to offer it. So there's going to be a changing landscape for online gaming in Wisconsin soon if all signs that we're seeing continue that the governors are working on a deal with the tribes about allowing that, and they embrace that opportunity.
How would that intersect with these national companies and versus the tribes being able to do online gaming?
Essentially, the whole crux is that you can't offer online gaming in Wisconsin unless you're a tribe. That would be the bottom line. Now, there are going to be lawsuits about this. The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty has already said it's going to sue. It thinks that this expansion is illegal. So watch how that plays out in the courts. But it's illegal right now to offer an online bet in Wisconsin, period. This move by lawmakers and the governor for online gaming with the tribes is a way around that because it would involve compacts, tribal lands, and those kinds of things.
Interesting. And do you think that the tribes could ever negotiate with a company like Polymarket or something?
Good question. There's been some question about whether they would partner and how that would work. So that's all to be determined as far as I know. All
right. Well, thanks for this background, JR. And as always, thanks for joining me on Capitol Notes.
Anytime.
That was J.R. Ross, editor of WizPolitics.com, speaking with me, WUWM's Maayan Silver. Listen for our segments every other Monday with an extended segment on lake effect, and check out the Capital Notes podcast wherever you get your podcasts.